Coons, Democrat from Delaware. He's on the Foreign Relations Committee. You know, Senator, I've always been dumbstruck by those, attack the Marshall Plan and attack the United States investing in other countries to try to build democracies across the globe as if we're suckers, when in fact we build those democracies which build trading partners for us, which have made over the past 60, 70 years, let me say it again, it's made America the most powerful economic engine in the history of mankind. And it happened because exactly what we did. We saved Western Europe from socialism and communism. And we built these huge trading partners across Asia by investing in rebuilding those economies.
That's right, Joe. On the wreckage of the Second World War, when the United States stood astride the globe, we were the only nuclear power. We had 90% of the world's manufacturing capability. Rather than imposing ourselves on the world in a colonial way, we invested massively in rebuilding Japan and Western Europe. And as a result, we got lots of allies and partners, countries that were reshaped in a way that reflected our values and priorities. And for decades, we have benefited from Germany and Japan being revitalized partners of ours, countries that now share our democratic values. NATO and the EU are not, as the president has repeatedly said, playing us for suckers, but are organizations that we designed and helped build in ways that have both helped secure the peace and helped provide massive markets for our exports and our growth in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and well into today.
Senator, it's Willie Geist. It's good to see you this morning. The president and the Department of Defense announced 5,200 American troops will head to the southern border with Mexico to help, they say, stem this caravan, which is currently about 2 months away by most estimates as they walk north. 3,500 people right now, estimated to be many, many fewer by the time it arrives, if it does eventually, to the border. What's your take on the idea of sending that many troops to the border to confront this?
Well, that's as many troops as we have deployed in the fight against ISIS. And I'll tell you, it is not the right comparison. And this is an attempt to distract us from the votes that are to be cast just a week from today in our election. We do need strong borders. We do need to have a fix to our broken immigration system. But mistakenly declaring a national emergency based on a slow-moving group of a few thousand women and children desperately fleeing violence in Central America and heightening that fear, stoking that fear by sending thousands of our troops to the border, where by law those troops really won't be able to do that much to help the Border Patrol, I think is an attempt at distracting us from what is the very real threat that millions of Americans will lose access to health care if the Republicans retain control of the House and the Senate and are able to move ahead with another attempt to repeal the protections of the Affordable Care Act. There are things that concern working Americans, like losing access to health care. Fixing our immigration system is something the president could have done had he chosen to when a bipartisan group of us presented him with a real solution. But he didn't want that. What he wanted was an election issue, and that's what he's turning this into.
Are you surprised, Senator, as some people are, that Defense Secretary Mattis went along with this plan, given his long record of service and the respect he has for the troops, that he signed off on the 5,200 to the border?
We don't know what the internal deliberations were. I would have expected the secretary to point out the fact that this is a massive over-response and that the Border Patrol is fully capable of handling what will likely be a few hundred exhausted individuals who may arrive on foot at our border weeks from now. I would have expected him to push back on that. But in the end, I would expect the defense secretary to follow the president's orders. And if he had ordered this, I'm not surprised he's followed it out.
Senator Caddy Kay has a question for you. Caddy?
Hi, Senator. What's the Democratic strategy if this is going to be the president's pitch for the last remaining week of this midterm campaign, when he's going to talk about birthright issues, send troops to the border? Is there a Democratic response on immigration specifically that perhaps is more powerful than the one we've had? Or is it, as you've just suggested, to change the topic and talk about health care?
Well, to be clear, I just emphasized the fact that Democrats have repeatedly voted to invest in border security. The president is spreading a falsehood that somehow Democrats believe in open borders. Nothing could be further from the truth. We voted for and co-sponsored bills in the Senate that would invest significantly in new border security. The president rejected that. And I think he's driving a false narrative on immigration. We do tend to change the subject to the extent to which immigrants have helped America, have helped grow our economy, and helped create opportunity for all of us. But what I'm hearing, Caddy, up and down my state here in Delaware, and as I've gone and campaigned in other states, is the level of anxiety and concern about losing health care that really is driving people to the polls. So if I've got a closing message this week, it's to urge people to pray, to be concerned, but to act, to get up off their couches, to stop texting and tweeting, and to go vote. And at the end of the day, I think if people vote their hopes and their concerns, they'll vote Democrat.
Senator, it's Richard Haas here. It wasn't that long ago that we were all talking about Saudi Arabia and the apparent murder of Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. What do you see you and your colleagues doing about Saudi Arabia when you come back into session? In particular, do you think there'll be a serious bipartisan movement to either limit arms sales to Saudi Arabia or how they can be used in Yemen?
Yes, I do. And as you know well, Richard, 20 of us, 20 senators, an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, sent a letter to President Trump when it became clear that the Saudis were lying and that it was likely that there had been a premeditated abduction, torture, and killing of an American resident journalist writing for an American paper. We sent a letter to the president triggering the Global Magnitsky Act, which requires him to conduct an investigation and then either impose sanctions on those responsible for this human rights violation or to explain to the Senate why he won't act. If the president continues to put alleged future arms sales ahead of our core values as a country that stands for free speech and the protection of journalists, then I do expect you'll see bipartisan action to rein in our support, whether through refueling or arms sales for the Saudi conduct of the war in Yemen, and to force a reconsideration of our relationship with the Saudi kingdom.
Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. And still ahead, there are a number of local and regional issues that will play out in the